Do you want to create a colourful display on your patio right through the year? Well, you're in the right place, as in this video I'll show you how. By picking the best plants, we can all have colourful displays in pots, hanging baskets and containers throughout the year. Plus, suggestions for some evergreen perennials that provide foliage interest all year round too, making these plants ideal to grow in combination with other flowers to add variety and interest to your patio and garden. They're a dwarf Alstroemeria, ideal for growing in containers. I wouldn't be without my Alstroemeria Sunshine, that is one of the longest flowering hardy perennials I know, forming its first flower stems around the end of May and continuing to develop more every month right the way through into autumn. Or Euphorbia Ascot Rainbow that produces a dome of stems each year that carry bright gold and green variegated foliage. This perennial is perfect in a pot, and I often plant it in combination with others for an autumn, winter and spring display when flowers open at the end of the tips of each shoot that bees adore feeding from. For pure foliage impact, you could grow something structural like ornamental grasses, and the bold form of Miscanthus Gold Breeze could be just the plant to add some vertical height and impact to your displays with its attractively patterned leaves. Or how about adding some variegated foliage to your patio pot combinations with Brunnera Jack Frost? Those silvery, almost metallic looking heart-shaped leaves filling out to support other flowering plants around it. This is a variety of perennial forget-me-not, so Jack Frost flowers early in the year, producing clouds of forget-me-not blue flowers above a canopy of colourful leaves. Of course you can grow seasonal summer bedding plants like long-flowering Nemesia Wisley Vanilla to add flowers that release their sweet scent throughout the summer, or sun-loving pelargoniums or geraniums that produce a succession of flowers all summer long, or pots of lilies like the lovely dwarf Oriental Lilium Sunny Martinique with these giant blooms and delicious fragrance too. But many people don't consider growing hardy perennials in pots. They plant them in borders, but for some reason when it comes to patio displays, they go for bedding plants and bulbs instead. Would you have considered growing coneflowers in containers? Varieties like Echinacea purpurea mediation can continue producing flowers from around June through into September, large open blooms with that characteristic spiky coneflower dome in the centre, surrounded by colourful outstretched petals like the spokes of a wheel. Or how about Veronica spicata or Speedwell, a lower growing summer flowering perennial that I usually grow along the front of my borders. This is my red fox that does put on a lovely display, breaking up the edge of a bed along the path. But don't they look lovely in pots, like this variety called Lavender Lightsaber, with its tight clusters of small mauved flowers on tall upright spikes? Or how about Sweet Lullaby, or a host of others, great grown on their own, or perhaps as part of an arrangement. Take the hardy perennial Bugle or Ajuga as another example. In borders, Bugle can spread to form a matted ground cover, and I've grown it in the past under my shrub roses, mixed in with lady's mantle and grey-leaved lamb's ears, Stachys lanata. But it grows well in a pot too. Just look at the long stems of Ajuga Caitlin's Giant, with its large bronzy purple leaves weeping down the sides of these containers. The glossy leaves catch the light and look impressive even when it isn't in flower. But when its rich blue flowers open from late spring through summer, at the top of short upright stalks, they look really impressive. And an Ajuga Caitlin's Giant I planted in a trough on its own as quite a simple feature provided seasonal summer flowers and colourful foliage all year round. Coming up in this video, I'll introduce you to a host of perennials that are perfect in pots, like Agapanthus Blue Storm, that produces more stems of flowers than any other variety of Agapanthus I know. Big and bold hostas, like this simple pot of Hosta Francee. Colourful leaved Heuchera black taffeta, which I enjoy for its lovely leaves and dainty flowers. Variegated ivy, good in combination with others, but also as a feature in a pot on its own, and many more coming up in this video. But let's kick off with something new that I've never tried growing in a patio pot before. I first came across this hardy perennial in a garden centre a year ago. Bought it, planted it in this pot and kept it in this pot over the winter, and it's come back into growth for the second year. I'm now through to the middle of June and it's in full flower. This is an Erigeron called Erigeron Sea Breeze. Beautiful, simple daisy-like flowers, a pink frill around the centre of a bold golden disc. Glorious flower display, and this should continue flowering. Sometimes they start flowering as early as May, but usually June, July or August times are the times you'll get this plant in flower. Now, I wasn't quite sure how to prune this over the winter time, so planted in a pot, a terracotta pot with a peat-free compost last summer, left it in a pot over the winter, kept it behind my arch here, just sheltered over the winter but outside. And although I'd cut the flowering stems back down, it still had a sort of a crown of green leaves carried right the way through winter. And I wasn't sure whether to shorten these back even further during the winter or leave them. So in the end, I erred on the side of caution. I pruned a few back, but I left some longer ones. And what happens if you do leave the longer ones is they will extend and carry this first flush of flowers. If I hadn't have done that, if I'd pruned all of last year's stems back much harder during the late winter, early springtime, then I would have had really a carpet of low foliage carrying the flowers, probably only growing to about a foot or so in height. But as I've left some of last year's stems on, these are carrying a lovely display of flowers. But when these are finished, I'll cut these right back hard. I'll cut these stems right the way back to the base, and this will leave these green shoots which have grown up through the early part of spring and early summer, which will carry flowers later. So it's these shoots which will be carrying flowers through July and August time, replacing the early display on last year's early stems. And I think this makes a lovely, bold, hardy perennial for a flower pot. It's a decent sized pot. It's a 12-inch pot holding plenty of compost, perfect for a plant like this. Now, as I say, the flowering display will continue through the summer months, through July and August, as new growth comes up from the base and carries those successional flushes of flowers. So prune out the old stems, make room for some new, encourage new growth from the bottom. And the other thing to do is to make sure you keep it well watered. What I tend to do with plants in patio pots is give them a really good water from above earlier in the day. Let that water drain down through the compost, but then I always leave the plants in a saucer of water. A good ½ inch, an inch of water in the base, particularly plants growing in terracotta pots, means that that water can be taken up during the day on hot summer days to sustain the growth, keep the flowers going, encouraging new growth, and keep this potted perennial display going right the way through summer. The compact growing Euphorbia minus Merlot is a great choice for a patio pot, as it won't grow too tall, remaining quite stocky and free branching, has deeply coloured foliage right through the year, and it flowers too. It's a hardy perennial, establishing its pot and lasting for many years. And this is one reason I chose Euphorbia minus Merlot to plant up in the autumn with a selection of other plants to create a long-lasting patio pot display. My planting combination included 5 plants. Minus Merlot provided the dark purple foliage. From autumn into winter, it's just these quite fleshy leaves that add colour and form to the arrangement. Next came a hardy shrub, a small plant of skimmier white globe with just 4 or 5 stems, each topped by a bulbous, clustered flower head. White globe adds colour and structure right through winter. Even though its flowers are only in tight bud, they won't fully open until around about April time, when it really lives up to its descriptive name of white globe. Berries add colour and interest to seasonal pots too, and I've chosen a small berrying Panetia or Gaultheria with pink berries like small shiny jewels. Sometimes the berries last well into winter, but once local birds, like my blackbirds, get hungry during colder weather, these berries will be on the menu and you can enjoy watching them feast on your winter display. Continuing the dark purple leaf theme, I've included another hardy perennial, a Heuchera called Black Taffeta. Lovely in leaf through winter, but producing flowers next summer too. And the flowers of Minus Merlot will be set off beautifully against these later in the spring. And lastly, I've chosen a Heuchera called Golden Colibri, a small variegated ivy, picked with its foliage contrast in mind, especially against the dark leaf of Black Taffeta, and also because small ivies can be planted at the edge of pots, so they spill over the sides gracefully as they grow, and it shoots intertwine with its neighbours to fill in the gaps. Minus Merlot produces lime green flowers that open at the end of March and through April, growing taller as we move through into May and June to reach a height of perhaps a couple of foot or so. And it's this long-lasting flowering performance that really makes Minus Merlot such a good choice for a small patio garden, especially in pots. Bees and other insects love feeding from the flowers, and as it blooms over such a large period, this plant will provide plenty of pollen and nectar for bees to enjoy over many months. As far as growing conditions are concerned, euphorbias are both heat and drought tolerant, making them suitable for hot and dry patios. But although euphorbias relish the sun, they will grow well in partial shade, pushing on good growth and flowering profusely. It's always a pleasure sharing my hints, tips, ideas and advice with everyone. So please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button right away and subscribe to my gardening channel. There's plenty more videos on my channel for you to enjoy too. I've always loved Agapanthus, having spotted them on holiday in warmer countries when I was younger. I never thought really you could grow them that well in the United Kingdom, but you can, although in my area I would tend to plant them in pots so that I can bring the pots into a sheltered position during the winter time. This variety I've had in a pot for many years now. As you can see, it's in a really decent sized pot. I can hardly move it. It's about the biggest sized pot I can get. If I do need to divide it, I have to put it into smaller pots. But this is an established variety and it's Agapanthus Blue Storm. This is an evergreen variety of Agapanthus. Some people say semi-evergreen. It just means that the leaves don't die down completely during the winter and you have to sort of tidy up the crown, whereas other Agapanthus, the leaves will completely die away and you can cut them off at soil level. On my summer patio, this Agapanthus starts producing its flower heads through June, with the first flowers probably showing colour around about the middle of June. And here I am towards the end of the month and I've got a really good flowering display which will last for many weeks on this long flowering variety. June, July are the typical months and I would expect this still to be carrying flowers right the way through July. And as you can see, this is a generous variety. It produces dozens of flower spikes. I can remember counting them one year. I don't know if I got quite so many this year, but one year I had about 50 of these lovely stems of bloom on this single clump. So you'll have dozens and dozens of them. Some of them still growing up from the base, some of them fully open, which means that Blue Storm will be in flower over many, many weeks to give you a long-lasting display to enhance your patio arrangements. Each individual flower head produces a number of these dainty little trumpets of bloom. What have I got on here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, a dozen or more of these little trumpets with that lovely blue stripe down the centre of the pale whitish blue outer petals, and in the centre of that bloom, just protruding out, these beautiful little stamens that the bees will come in and feed from, just getting some sustenance through the summer. So a lovely flowering display, a long-lasting flowering display, repeat flowering blooms, and magnificent little heads. Not as big as some other varieties of Agapanthus, but what it makes up for is the number. Dozens and dozens of heads of flower over many weeks. And another feature of Agapanthus Blue Storm is that it's quite drought tolerant. So if you're in a very hot region, where you tend to go away a lot for weekends or at work, this variety doesn't need the regular daily watering that some other summer bedding plants need. I do keep my big pots in saucers so I can top that up with moisture earlier in the day to give plants a reservoir of water to take up at the height of a summer's day. But being a drought tolerant variety, it's not going to suffer too much if you get really hot days and you haven't managed to get out and do the watering. So for long flowering summer season of colour, dozens of stems produced over the course of many, many weeks, each topped with these lovely blue, slightly striped flower heads. Then Blue Storm could be just the Agapanthus to fill that summer colour gap and produce a magnificent display to brighten up your patio. Now once these flowers have faded, I'll literally follow each of these stalks right the way back to its base and cut it away just to tidy up the plant and leave the foliage in place for the rest of the year. I can move the pot out of the way into a quieter position for the rest of summer just to keep on growing and keep it watered and fed through the rest of the year. And then in the autumn, I'll move the pots to my unheated greenhouse to give it some winter protection. It doesn't need warmth or heat over winter, but I just want to keep the worst of that cold, wet winter weather off it. Stop watering it as we go through autumn, let the foliage die back. I tidy up that foliage in the new year as we're moving through into late winter, early spring. Tidy up the plant, you'll start getting the new growth developing. That's a sign that I can start watering again. You'll soon get a lovely crop of new leaves developing, and I'll move this pot back out onto my patio probably sometime through May, ready for it to start producing its flower spikes as we move through June and July to put on a magnificent summer display.
Lavender is one plant that really brings in the bees when in full flower, and a lavender hedge can be alive with them, busily feeding as they move from flower to flower, gathering nectar and pollen. If you've got space, then perhaps a low lavender hedge could line your garden path, but lavenders also grow well in pots in a sunny position. Plant breeders continue to have fun producing such a wonderful range of varieties with different colours, sizes and flower forms, so there'll certainly be one that catches your eye. Anouk is a popular type of French lavender, or Lavandula stoicus, with vibrant purple flower spikes topped with these distinctive tufts or bracts. And there's a white form too, that does have a lovely mix of colours in its flower head, pushing up through a crown of silvery green foliage. But there are loads of others that you might not find in your local garden centre, but you can find them online from specialist lavender nurseries. But do check that not all lavenders are fully hardy. So in your area the conditions might be too cold for some varieties, and some do need some winter protection. Lavender fathead is a compact grower with short purple ears poking up from its flower heads, while award-winning Pretty Polly has deep purpley blue flower heads topped by long extending ears. Or how about the green lavender, Lavandula viridis? Very different, isn't it? But best treated as a half-hardy variety and not fully cold-hardy in a cold winter. And of course all of these give off that wonderful, calming, relaxing scent. And you could even pick a few flowers to make your own fragrant potpourri too. In the past I've grown lavender in pots, and they can look lovely when they're at their best. I actually planted up 3 terracotta pots with French lavender for a short seasonal display. And in my eyes, that's the problem with lavender. This can be quite a short-lived display, just as it is with lavender growing in the garden for that matter, especially if the weather is hot and dry, which shortens their flowering season considerably. So what do you think? Do you think lavender really earns its place in pots or in a garden? Let me know in the comments below. One hardy perennial I just wouldn't be without growing in patio pots is the hosta. I've got quite a range of them. You can get varieties which stay short and compact, ones which get big and bold with large leaves, quite tall, beautiful foliage and lots of different varieties to choose from. And this is one of my favourites. I've had it for many years now in a pot. It's called Hosta Francee. It's got a lovely wavy texture to the leaf itself, and the margin is a creamy white colour, just setting off the central green panel perfectly. But as we move through summer, through late June into July, you will get the flowers. And Francee produces these upright, tall, quite stocky, wiry stalks with flowers at the tip, little lavender blue trumpets of flowers opening from the base to the tip in succession over many weeks, producing a flowering display which the bees adore too. But this really sets off the plant perfectly through the summer months. Now once these flowers are finished, you can literally follow the stalks right the way down to the base and cut them off. Remove all the old flower heads completely, otherwise they'll start setting seeds and they don't look that attractive. So remove the flowers and enjoy the foliage foil for the rest of the year. Once we get through to autumn, all I do with my hostas in pots is I move them behind my garden arch to a sheltered part of the garden. They're quite hardy, they can stay outside for the winter. The leaves will gradually die down as we move through December and January, and then you can cut everything away at compost level, remove all the old foliage, and as we move through to spring you'll see the first signs of the new shoots of the hostas starting to push up, and those will soon unfurl as we move through spring to put on another superb foliage display through the spring, summer and autumn months. Now this hosta obviously was smaller when I first bought it, and it would have been planted in a smaller pot, but over the years I've gradually repotted it into a bigger pot, and that's something to do in spring. Smaller hostas, once they become pot bound, move them up from pot to pot. And because this is a perennial which is going to stay in a pot for such a long period of time, I like to choose a compost which has got a lot of loam in it, got some John Innes compost in it. You could use John Innes number 3 or use a multi-purpose compost with some extra John Innes number 3 compost mixed in, just to give the compost itself some heart, some guts to sustain a perennial like this right the way through from year to year. And of course,
The other thing every plant in a pot needs is water. And when things are growing in pots, it is up to you as the gardener to remember to water them regularly, and hostas do like a regular water supply. I quite often, for my patio pots, use one of these hose end diluters where I put a powdered fertiliser in a container, and as I water the plants I can either just use plain water or turn the dial and give a liquid feed to the plants. So for watering and feeding at the same time, this is the perfect way. And with my hostas, literally every day I will just add some water from the top of the pot, let that water soak deeply down into the compost itself, and then a lot of my pots I stand in saucers, and that means I can top that saucer up with water, fill it up in the morning, and the pot itself, especially terracotta pots, can absorb that moisture during the heat of the day. If you pop out during the day and you see that there's no water left in the saucer at the bottom, then just top it up again, keep it topped up. That just makes sure that your plants never go short of water. Now, everyone knows that some garden pests adore feeding on hostas. Slugs and snails can be a real pain and turn their leaves to ribbons. So be on the lookout for any signs of damage. Growing hostas in pots, I find, does help to prevent attack from slugs and snails, particularly when the pots are on a patio and they're away from borders where slugs and snails might well be hiding. And if you keep your pots in a saucer as well, I find that moat of water around the base can sometimes act as a little bit of a barrier to stop the slugs and snails from finding the pots themselves. If you spot any damage at all, so a plant like this has been a particularly dry year this year so far, and there's very few slugs and snails around and no sign of damage at all, but if I do ever spot some nibbled leaves, that's a sure sign that there must be a snail hiding in the pot, or they're coming out at night and venturing out. So I go out after dark with a head torch on and I'll search around the plants. Sometimes you're lucky and you'll go out and just inspect all of your hostas one at a time, and you might find the culprit and you can pick it off and get rid of it. But that, I find, the most successful way. Be vigilant. Any sign of damage, try and find the culprit, control them, and keep your hostas looking glorious. Now, when I'm looking for garden plants, quite often I will try and find plants which the Royal Horticultural Society have given an award of garden merit. Really, that's like a seal of approval. If you can find plants with an AGM, quite often it has got a little trophy symbol alongside it in catalogues or on plant labels. You know that that plant is going to be a good doer, and Hosta Francee has got an award of garden merit. So you know that seal of approval means this is a plant certainly worthy of a spot in your garden. Sometimes through life you hear people say, keep it simple, and that couldn't be truer of some of the hardy perennials that I grow around my garden, especially those in patio pots. Something simple, something solo can work really well. And a case in point is some of the foliage feature plants that I have in patio pots, many of which can look good right the way through the year. Take this very simple pot of ivy, a small leafed variety with a beautiful variegated pattern on it, planted in a pot, looks good right the way through the year, even in the depths of winter. You can easily keep it trimmed, just snip back any of these side shoots if they get too long, but otherwise I think as it develops and it starts flowing over the edge of the pot, it does look really nice, just as a feature, as a foil perhaps to other flowering plants. The leaves on this variegated ivy look lovely just on its own, and there are dozens and dozens of different varieties of ivy you can choose. Some of them can be plain green, some of them will have golden markings, some will have silver markings, and a range of others too. And just one plant put in a pot, or if you can buy really small ones earlier in the year, put perhaps 3 in a larger pot, and over time they will spread out, they will fill in, they will start to flow over the edges. In the past I have actually put a small obelisk, a small support in a pot, and spiraled on the growth, taking it up to create more of a column, more of a ivy topiary if you like, and kept that for a few years. I even once got a spiral support and put that in a pot, and the ivy spiraled on. I could just weave it on, tie it into place with some green string, and created a nice display. But for something sweet and simple, very affordable, something that will last for many, many years, try an ivy in a pot. But ivies don't just have to be grown on their own. Remember, they make great companions when you plant them in with other things in some of your patio pots displays. This variety is called Golden Colibri, another really lovely variegated variety. Just bought a little tiny small pot of that to put in my autumn pot arrangement with a range of other things like the lovely Heuchera black taffeta and Euphorbia minus Merlot. So as a combination, ivies certainly have a place. Just planted at the edge, so those shoots will trail over the side, and I'll leave this in here right the way through. It can probably stay in this pot for a few years, and I can tidy up the display of other perennials around it if I need to. But all in all, ivies are a really valuable evergreen plant, and these small leafed ones certainly play a great part in providing extra colour on your patio displays. I love growing ornamental grasses in patio pots, probably one of the ultimate hardy perennials for growing in patio displays, really valued for their leaves, for their foliage, for the colour they bring. Some of them, like this golden-leafed Heuchera, will die down in winter. Others, like this Carex Evergold, will carry the foliage right through the winter months too. So a pot like this can look good literally all the year round. So lots of grasses can be grown in pots. I've got another one here called Imperator rubra. And Imperator has a lovely green leaf, but it takes on these red tints as it develops too. It won't grow an awful lot taller than this. I've never known it to flower, but it will put on about, maybe 2 foot or so of growth, and a little clump like this just slowly expands over the years. You can move it up from a smaller pot to a bigger pot as you go through the years. The Imperator, again, will die down in winter, so literally all I'll do at some point during the winter months is to cut all of this foliage off right down at the base, stand up to compost level. Don't delay, don't wait until spring, because the new leaves will start coming up. You'll be cutting away the old growth and damaging the new ones, but during the winter is fine for pruning the Imperator. Same with the Heuchera. This has a very, very graceful habit, doesn't it? So I just love the way that these stems will just catch the breeze and just waft slowly during the summer breeze. Again, most of these I'll grow in full sun, although they will tolerate some dappled shade too. So a single pot of Heuchera could look lovely. And a lot of things in the sun, in patio pots, which are terracotta rather than plastic, I will keep them in a saucer. So when it comes to my daily watering, I can literally pour water into that saucer and leave a reserve of moisture for the plant to take up during the day. Usually my routine is to start by watering from above, water earlier in the day before the sun gets hot, before it gets scorching. Watering from the top lets the water soak down through the compost, then just top up the saucers, and you know that you've left plants with enough moisture to get through the day. You really don't want grasses to dry out, or the leaves can get damaged and start to frazzle up, but otherwise keep them moist and they look superb. Carex Evergold, the name says it all, doesn't it? Evergold. It does produce a sort of insignificant sort of flower to grow up above the canopy of spreading leaves. Each of these leaves just banded green down the side of a central creamy golden band, but it will carry the leaves right the way through the year. Every few years you'll notice that the leaves are probably starting to get a little bit brown, especially at the tips. So it's time to take stock and to rejuvenate. So what I tend to do, perhaps it might be every 2 to 3 years, is in the spring with a pot like this, I will cut all of the foliage off. I know it's still got some of its evergreen appeal, but if you cut it all off, keep the plant watered and fed, feeding with a liquid feed just to boost the new growth, and you'll get new leaves coming up to put on another fine foliage display. So there we have it, 3 nice grasses, dwarf and compact, all great for patio pots. The Japanese bloodgrass, Imperata, this lovely Hakanakloa, and there's some different colours and forms of this available, and different varieties of Carex too, Evergold being one of my favourites. For something short, compact and perfect in a pot, check out this award winner. This is Agapanthus Double Diamond, received the Award of Garden Merit from the Royal Horticultural Society for its garden performance. Superb in a pot, producing a crown of foliage about 9-10 inches tall, and then spikes of flowers up to just over a foot in height to put on an absolutely superb high summer display of bloom. And its name, Double Diamond, alludes to the fact that these are double white flowers. Beautiful little heads of white trumpets, in each of those little trumpets of white bloom it's got a double flowered form, putting on a lovely full head and a beautiful display when it's in full flower in high summer. Now, I've grown my plant in a pot for quite a few years now, and I moved this into my unheated greenhouse for the winter just to give it some winter protection. I think outside it can get cold and damp, and it can really suffer if you get a severe winter, so some winter protection is ideal. But this is a plant for the summer patio. Put it somewhere you can enjoy it when it's in full bloom. Other Agapanthus I've got on the patio flowering around about June into July, and now we're moving through July. This is when Double Diamond really comes into its own. Now, Double Diamond is perfect on a hot sunny patio. In fact, you'll prefer a position where it gets full sun to the height of the day. And the lovely thing about Agapanthus is they're pretty drought tolerant too. So even in a very hot, dry summer, your Agapanthus should still flourish. I still tend to keep my pot in a little saucer so that I can top that up with water. If conditions are really dry, you can literally just fill the saucer with moisture, and then the pot can take up the extra water it needs on a really, really hot summer's day. Flowers will develop over the course of several weeks. So I've got some stems in full flower, but new ones still developing, which gives Double Diamond that lovely long flowering season. And once these flowers have faded, I'll follow the stems right the way back down to the base and just snip each one away completely, just to tidy it up and leave the crown of leaves for the rest of the year. Move it into my protected greenhouse for the winter, stop watering, let that foliage die down, clear it up, and resume watering in the spring. As the pot develops, it will need to be put into a slightly larger pot year on year, just to accommodate the roots and this beautiful crown of foliage. If you notice any leaves just dying, just snip these off, pull them away. Sometimes leaves will start dying at the very tip, so you can just follow these back and just pull them away neatly, just to tidy up the plant, keep the display looking its best. Otherwise, for me, Double Diamond, short, compact, beautiful, pure white blooms are one of my favourite Agapanthus, and a perennial to grow in a patio pot. Another hardy perennial I really like is this Houttuynia. Houttuynia cordata chameleon. This is a plant which you can put in your borders, you can put it around bog gardens, but it doesn't half spread and can become very invasive. Every single little piece of root
you leave in the ground, if you try to dig it out, will develop into a new plant. And I had this in an area of my garden, lovely variegated leaf, dies down completely in the winter, but comes up to produce a beautiful foliage display which will last right the way through the year until the end of autumn. And if you put it in a pot, it's self-contained. It's not going to spread, it's not going to become invasive. It will just provide this beautiful variegated feature right the way through the majority of the year. As I say, it will die down in late autumn. You can cut it off at soil level sometime during the winter. New shoots will come up through the spring. So as a foliage feature plant on even a shady area of the garden, I think this is ideal. You'll start getting these dainty little white flowers, and they're sweet, developing at the tips of some of the shoots. So not only do you have this beautiful, colourful, variegated leaf display right the way through from spring to autumn, but in the summer the plants will be decorated by these nice little, they're small but they're very sweet, just really nice display of bloom to brighten up the plant, just developing at the very tips of the shoots themselves. So this is a very valuable, I think, hardy perennial. It will come back every year, perfect, I think, in a pot, because a pot like this stops the roots from spreading and invading your borders. Hardy, robust and reliable. A hardy perennial which competes with hostas any day for wonderful foliage appeal. And to make watering easier, especially through the summer, and especially if you're growing plants in terracotta pots which are porous, is to have a saucer underneath each pot, and then in the morning you can top that up with moisture. Usually I start by just putting some water in from the top so that water will flow down through the compost and wet it, but I'll leave the pot in a saucer of water. This won't cause waterlogging. You've just left a centimetre or two of water in the saucer for the plant to take up during the course of the day. So it's only the very base of the pot which is in moisture, and terracotta will absorb some of that up and keep the plant looking healthy. The other thing you might notice as this plant develops, and at the moment we're just in the first half of June, and I've already got probably about 1.5 feet of growth on this Houttuynia. The shoots can start to lean and bend outwards. No problem with that. You might just enjoy the rather lax habit as it develops through summer. But if you want, you can cut this back by half. You'll leave the stockier bases to these stems. They will send out new side shoots, and you'll end up with a much more robust, upright display for a patio pot. Some people give their hardy perennials in their borders, what they call the Chelsea chop, cutting down growth by about half as we move through from the end of May into early June, around about the time of the Chelsea flower show, hence it's called the Chelsea chop. And that keeps plants stockier. They will send out more shoots, but it will stop the lax, leaning, bending habit that sometimes Houttuynias can have in pots. I think this is ideal in a shade garden. So if you've got a patio in a very shaded position that probably gets no direct sun at all, then how about that? A Houttuynia in a pot to produce a foliage feature right the way through from spring through to the end of autumn. I planted up this hanging basket for winter and spring interest really, with a sedge or a Carex called Ice Dance, a little skimmia which gave me some late winter spring flowers, variegated euonymus, and a sedum here called Angelonia, which has got some lovely big flower spikes on it at the moment, but it's a nice succulent trailing habit with arching stems, perfect in a pot. But when I planted this Carex in here, what I didn't realise, having just planted the parent plant in the top, is that over the course
of the spring and into early summer, it would send shoots out all the way round the side of the basket. Isn't that enchanting? Now, the liner of this basket is a sort of coconut fibre material which just fits the basket perfectly, holds the compost in, lets a little bit of air in as well. And the Carex has managed to push its way out through that liner to put on a really nice display of foliage right the way around the side of the basket itself. I think that is actually completely unexpected, not planned, I hasten to add, but it's created quite a nice little feature all on its own. And isn't Ice Dance lovely? The leaves themselves have got a green central band with a creamy margin right the way down the length on either side. So a nice variegated grass, and the habit poking out through the sides has made this basket even more attractive than it was during the winter. So I'm going to leave it in here right the way through the year and just let that fill out. These flower spikes will eventually be cut off, but I'll leave the foliage in there. The sedum itself is going to provide year-round colour, being an evergreen sedge. And I think what this really does tell you is that if this was planted in a garden rather than a container, just look how it would spread. I'm not sure you'd say it's necessarily invasive, but certainly that single parent plant will have sent out these underground rhizomes to spread into surrounding areas and take over. So be warned, if you put Carex Ice Dance in your borders, I think this is one grass that really would take over, but left in a hanging basket or container, it's got a beautiful evergreen display. And as with any sedges or grasses, if you do find you've got the odd leaf that looks discoloured and dies back during the summer, just give them a trim off, cut them back at their base, or if you've got the tips of shoots which are starting to turn brown, nothing wrong with just snipping these off completely. Eventually the whole leaf might die back, you can cut it back to its base, but just snip those off and maintain this lovely foliage display. Sedum or ice plants are a hardy perennial plant. They're very easy to propagate from cuttings as well. I'll probably try and cover that on my YouTube channel in the future, but I put a display of them along the front, the side of my border here alongside my path. Got a little thundercloud at the end, got a variegated variety called Lajos here, and I've got Mr. Goodbud growing at the far side. I've also put a Mr. Goodbud in a patio pot, so if you want something for your patio displays, these sedums or ice plants are really good. They don't demand much watering during the summer, but you'll have a lovely display of leaves, either variegated ones like on Lajos, or green, or this beautiful one here, I'll come to that in a minute. And then as we move through August, they'll start flowering, giving you flowers through into September and October. Bees adore feeding on sedum flowers too. I've had bumblebees buzzing away feeding on these for several weeks now. And there are many, many different varieties you can get. So check out the nurseries and garden centres in your area, see what you can find. I've just got a very, very small selection. This particular one is a sedum variety called Atlantis, and it actually won the Chelsea Flower Show Plant of the Year a few years ago. It's only very small, very compact, spreading variety, and you can divide these up in the spring and turn one plant like this into 2 or 3 if you want. So very easy to propagate from either cuttings or divide them up. And you will have, as we develop through spring, lovely variegated leaves, green marking down the centre, cream around. Some of the leaves even turn out just to be plain cream too. So lovely display of foliage. Then as we move through summer, late summer into autumn, the flowers will open. And Atlantis has a lovely golden bloom which will last for many weeks. A succession of flowers developing on this little compact plant. Bees will be feeding from this one too. And I will just leave this in a pot throughout the year. those stems will die back in the autumn. I'll just let them die right the way back, so you don't need to give it any winter protection. If you want and you're in a very cold area, you might just want to move the pot into the shelter, put it under a cold frame, put it in your greenhouse. The stems will die back, and then sometime through the winter I'll cut all of those old stems back right the way down the bottom, and you'll get new leaves growing out in the spring to put on the new growth and the new display for the following year. This golden oregano is another sun-loving herb that I would prefer to grow in a pot. I have seen it growing in gardens where it is spread around through a little herb garden area to provide wonderful ground cover, and it does look superb, but it doesn't really know its bounds. It will spread out. So grown in a container like this, you can make sure that it won't become invasive. Beautiful golden leaf, lovely little flowers later in the summer as well. So mixed in with some sage or some rosemary or some other herbs, you can create a lovely potted display. So grown in a pot, as you would mint, oregano can be kept self-contained. Plant it out in your borders with great care. Of course, you can chop bits up and remove it if it does become invasive, but I think for a pot display, this is the perfect situation for this sun-loving herb. Now, one hardy shrub, I should probably call it rather than a hardy perennial, that I do like in my patio pots, which actually stays in these pots as a feature 12 months of the year, and I just change the bedding display around it between summer and winter, is this beautiful variegated yucca. This is Yucca Variegata, which has got long spiked sword-like leaves. Careful of these spikes at the very tips of each leaf. This gives it its common name of Adam's needle, because these are absolutely needle sharp points. And it's got a variegated stripe, green band down the centre, lovely golden bands down either side of the leaf. And this forms a beautiful evergreen display. Perfect for a patio pot and perfectly hardy. So these plants are left outside all year round, no problem at all. They'll survive the 4 seasons of the year and provide contribution in structure and form. Perfect architectural form for a patio pot all year round. And I like to use plants like yuccas. You could do the same with cordylines if you want, as centerpieces in patio pots, and just put something else around. So this summer I've got a creeping zinnia, a Sanvitalia called Million Suns, which I've planted around the edge, and this fills out over the course of the summer months, flowering continually through the summer until the autumn. And once these flowering plants are finished, I'll remove them probably end of September, October time, and either leave it bare for the winter or replace the Sanvitalia with something like a little viola or a winter flowering pansy to give me some colour through the winter and spring months instead.
The deep purple, almost black, ruffled foliage of Heuchera black taffeta creates quite a dramatic display, which is why I chose this compact mound-forming perennial for one of my patio pots. Its slightly lobed leaves have a lovely wavy edge, so their crinkly appearance catches the sunlight nicely to provide patterns of light and dark, enhanced by the sheen on the leaf surface. I originally planted black taffeta in a seasonal pot arrangement to provide autumn and winter interest, alongside a skimia called white globe, Euphorbia minus Merlot, a burying panetia, and a trailing ivy called golden colibri. Through spring, Minus Merlot started to flower, and as we move into June, it's the turn of black taffeta to produce its delicate, upright flower spikes, displaying dozens of pale pink, bell-shaped flowers, and flowering should continue through summer into August. And it's these pretty pink flower stalks that give Heuchera its common name of coral bells. Heuchera black taffeta is a tough perennial, which has been described as drought tolerant too. It's an excellent year-round plant, enjoying partial shade but will tolerate full sun, grows well in a container, but would be equally at home in a border, planted near the front to show off its compact dome of dark foliage and its pretty pink summer flowers. As with all Heuchera, don't plant the crown too deeply, avoid waterlogged conditions, and don't overwater. Otherwise, this variety is a tough and tolerant one that I for one adore. I wouldn't be without my perennials, shrubs and bedding plants brightening up my patio and garden. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, could I ask you a big favour? Please could you click the thumbs up like button and subscribe to my gardening channel. Thank you. And there are plenty more plants you can grow in containers, like short varieties of clematis that give you early summer flower, and you can find a full video on how to plant and grow these on my channel at Adam's Gardening Guides. But if growing fuchsias in pots is more to your liking, then do check out my Fuchsia Masterclass. This is a special video packed with ideas on growing, planting and propagating fuchsias. So if you'd like to have a go at growing fuchsias from cuttings, then just follow the step-by-step advice in that video. Do check it out. Very many thanks for watching, and I hope this video has given you a few fresh ideas for your own garden. And if you check out the videos on my channel, you'll find lots more tips and advice on growing plants in pots and containers and developing patio gardens like I've got here. I hope to welcome you back into my garden very soon, but for now, whatever you're up to, happy gardening.